Welcome to LinkedIn Live. And wow, we have an amazing presentation for the building industry today. I'm here with my good friend Tom, and he's going to lead a discussion with a panel of experts. Tom, this is your chance to tell us how to pivot, finding a path into BIM and VDC.
Well, you know what, Joe, that was a great question. And I found myself terribly inadequate to answer it. So I phoned a couple friends and asked them to join us today to, supplement the very inadequate answers that I would give. So thank you everyone for joining us today. This is How to Pivot. It's a discussion about the many changes within our industry and the growing demand for BIM and VDC professionals across the building and design industry. And the many challenges that people face, both filling these positions within their organizations, as well as for individuals who are trying to pivot and move into those realms and into those roles. So joining me today, we have Marcellus from Ellis Don. Marcellus is a senior VDC coordinator in the ICI division. We're also joined by Dylan Shepard from Bird Construction. Dylan is an industrial VDC coordinator. We also have Chetna, founder and director of BIMWise. She joins us from Chetna. Where are you again? Are you located out in Toronto or? Yeah, I think so. We're also joined by Brent. Brent is the chief technical officer for Turner Fleischer Architects. And we're also joined by Laura Sharp, who is the implementation service manager for Revisto. And I think just before we get started here, I do want to say a special thank you to Joe and the team at Fusion Tech for hosting this discussion. This is going to be a really exciting panel today. So I'm going to move forward with our discussion today. So first thing, like I said, I want to thank Joe for hosting this discussion and this back and forth. For all those who are interested, Fusion Tech is hosting all kinds of exciting discussions and webinars all throughout the year. Joe has always an exciting and interesting lineup of characters. So if you are interested, please follow him on LinkedIn and follow Fusion Tech for any of their exciting events and online webinars that they're going to be hosting. Joe, anything in specific you want to maybe call out?
No, just I always enjoy our conversations, Tom, and what a beautiful, amazing panel you have, and what a need for this topic. So, for us, LinkedIn Live is yes, we need sales like everyone else. We need to market, but to me, it's about the discussion between people and connecting people together, and that's what I really see LinkedIn Live as a conduit for that. So it's our privilege.
Thank you, Joe. So like I said, here are our panelists, and these are the exciting organizations that they're coming from for this discussion today. One thing I do want to highlight for everyone who's listening and joining us is this is meant to be a very interactive live session. So we are going to have questions that we're going to put to our panelists, obviously, throughout this session. But we also want you guys to join us in the chat. So please, if you want to add your comments, or if there's a question that comes up to the panel, please, if you have a relevant answer or you would like to share your thoughts on it, please comment through LinkedIn for the LinkedIn Live session. We're going to be going in and checking the chat regularly throughout the session. So if there are any comments, answers, or your own questions that you want to throw to the panel, please add them there, and we'll go in and we'll be checking in with the chat throughout the session. We also will have a Q&A at the end of this discussion, and that Q&A is going to be exclusively through the chat. So if you do have questions that you want to put towards any member of the panel for the Q&A at the end of the session, please put it in the chat through LinkedIn. So before we get started with some of the other questions that we're going to get to today, I have a question for each member of our panel. And that is, how did you pivot? Now, no one comes out of the womb a BIM or VDC coordinator, at least not so far as I know. And I don't think we're yet able to 3D print BIM coordinators. So you had to get here somehow. How did you personally pivot? And to start, I'm going to pick on my former colleague, Dylan Shepard. Dylan, how did you pivot?
Hey, thanks, Tom. So I got into this line of work from a particular passion with doing industrial sheet metal projects where I got constantly frustrated with the really slow and mundane way of going through the motions time and time again. And it was very people driven. And there's nothing wrong with that. But ultimately, it's like we have a really good chance of human error. And so I ended up going down a path where I picked Autodesk Fabrication Suite software to help me and our team move through the process from estimate to shop drawings to fabrication using a centralized database. And from there, just the passion continued to grow. And that's how I ended up moving from realizing like I had this acquired this really specific skill set for a small piece of the industry and realizing there's a much bigger conversation at play.
Something that I'm sure a number of people on this panel can definitely relate to. Brent, I'm going to pick on you next. How did you pivot?
Sure. When I graduated, I went to CH2M Hill, and one of the first things they noted about me was, hey, you like this 3D stuff. Can you help us to connect the PNIDs to the model and fuse it into SCADA? And as an intern architect, I said, I don't know what SCADA is. I don't know what a PNID is. But I started to learn. And I quickly came to realize this link between the designer, the process makeup, and that connectivity through design into the actual operations, and having that all simultaneously happening during the design process opened the door for what we're now calling digital twins. So it really helped me to shift the focus of my career to actually creating data connections and as close to the concept of single source of truth as I could, considering the multiple data sources.
And do you, Brent, just one follow-up to that, do you find that it's oftentimes the people like the intern that doesn't know anything, that has nothing to fear, that's usually the person that ends up getting themselves into that BIM and VDC world, whether they like it or not?
I would think so. And it's my first senior architect said to me always in my feedback, temper your enthusiasm. And I never understood what that meant 20 years ago. It's like, what's wrong with being enthusiastic? I get it now. You're enthusiastic about everything, so you can take on anything. So they're attuned to trying the new and trying to mold something. So yeah, that's definitely what I find.
Well, and this next question for Chetna. Did you find that you had a similar path, or did you find that it was a little bit different for yourself?
Sorry.
Oh, I think yeah.
Yes. So, this guy just who spoke right in front of me, he's the culprit. He's the one. So I call my pivot to BIM as very similar to an Indian arranged marriage. I fell in love with architecture, and I was employed by the transit group, an IBI group, as a job captain for their Eglinton Crosstown project. And Brent around the same time he was at IBI, he was building up his design technology team. And I don't know, something happened between the directors, some discussions happened. And I just know that the next day I've been introduced that this is your new boss and he's going to, help you transition into BIM, and rest is history. So, and you know how Indian arranged marriages are, like you're thrown into a marriage and you learn to love the guy, you learn to live with the guy. So I just am now, not just I'm loving the guy, I'm running the household. And I think I'm rocking it pretty well.
I think there are a number of people that would probably echo that you're rocking it pretty well. For those who don't know, Chetna has a podcast called The BIM Student. It's fantastic. If you ever get a chance to listen in to her sessions, they're always very enlightening. But I love that there are many people that sometimes go into BIM and VDC not entirely willingly. And to that, I'm going to switch to Laura here. Laura, how did you pivot, and how willingly did you pivot?
I don't even feel like I pivoted. It was just a gradual walking along a path, and found myself there more than a direct plan. Mine actually came pretty organically. It was, architectural tech. I was doing the drafting, brought in Revit, brought in more 3D software, and I loved it. And I was more and more curious. I love the efficiency of it. And the more that I learned, the more I wanted to learn. So I just kind of kept going. When I hit a stalemate where I was and I wanted to learn more, I just found a way to keep going. So yeah, I think I'm feeling this with the whole panel, just a general curiosity and how to do more and better.
And I think the other lesson that a lot of us have taken from this is going to Brent's former senior architect's comment, be wary of your enthusiasm. It'll get you into all kinds of exciting opportunities and terrible challenges that you've never even imagined. Speaking of which, Marcellus, how did you pivot, and how many challenges did you have to overcome to get there?
Well, to start off with, it was mostly just a sense of curiosity. I was actually on a project where I had a bit more free time than most projects, and I actually decided to go to SAIT to do night courses, and recalled a conversation I had with a fellow colleague from, or alumni, sorry, from my program at NAIT. And she had been doing a capstone project on BIM and explained kind of the framework and the concepts of BIM. And I thought that was a really interesting idea. So fast forward about approximately 10 years, I find myself remembering that conversation and started searching BIM courses. And the first one that came up was a Revit course at SAIT. So next thing I know, I'm doing 12 weeks of night courses in Revit. And once those were completed, I went to our department head at Alice Dawn in the Calgary office and just explained my interest in BIM and pursuing that direction with the company. So they had put me in contact with our BIM manager at that time. And basically what they did was involve me in the group, even though I wasn't an active member on any project specifically. They let me, so to speak, do a, just kind of sit in and join in on the meetings, kind of see what it's all about and just be involved. And I did that for about 6 months until I was given the opportunity to take a VDC position on a hospital edition in Penticton. So not only did I get to make a shift into an area that I became interested in, but I got to move to the Okanagan. And there was a fair amount of challenges along the way. But long story short is I ended up where I am now.
No, and that's, I think curiosity is certainly the theme. And I hope, if there's anyone watching and listening to this session where, you are a curious individual and you're not always finding the avenue to start expanding that in your career, make sure that you do reflect on that throughout this session as we hear from all the different members of our panel. Because there are a lot of people that are interested, that have this, there's curiosity. They've heard about BIM and VDC, and BIM and VDC now is expanding. There's so many different avenues. There's so many different aspects and specialties that you can go into. But there's a lot of people that may not feel like they have an inroad for it. And that's our first question and discussion today. So again, and if there's anyone in the chat that if you, manage to pivot into BIM and VDC, please comment your story down below. We'd love to check back in with you and hear your own stories. So I'm going to jump here to a little clip. This is a clip from a College Humor video where this is one clip where a guy is asking Google how to become an astronaut. And I've had this conversation with so many people that want to go into BIM and VDC. And when they've gone to try to find roads into BIM and VDC, they sometimes encounter something similar to this. So we're just gonna watch this quick little clip here.
How to become astronaut.
Bad news.
How to work for NASA.
Sorry.
Planetarium jobs.
Nope.
Planetarium volunteers. Help wanted laser tag.
Now we're talking.
So I don't know if everyone necessarily emoted with that clip, but I've had many discussions with people all throughout the industry who weren't interested. The desire was there, but they just couldn't find a road in, you know. And then when someone said, oh, but I'll do this tiny little thing on the side, they were like, oh, that's great, you can do that. With that sort of in mind, I want to kind of go to one of the questions I put to our panelists. So I put out a little questionnaire to our panelists about this question of like, I picked 4 very common paths that people look towards to trying to find an inroad into BIM and VDC. And those are often things like learning on your own time. We heard that in multiple instances, especially with individuals like Marcellus. Seeking training through your employer, joining a BIM or VDC community or organization. This could be something through like the Calgary BIM Association, or something like an organization like CanBIM. And then there was also like continuing education, going back to school, doing night classes, things like that. So I asked all of our panelists to pick their top, second, third, and fourth choices for how they think or how they would recommend individuals start looking into going down these paths. And as you can see, training through your employer and going back to school were weighted very heavily next to learning on your own time and joining a BIM or VDC community organization. So to start, I just want to kind of take a look at what everyone's first picks were. So Chetna, you put training through your employer, along with Marcellus, who put going back to school, Dylan, who put training through your employer, and Brent, who said going back to school. So I'm going to pick on Brent here, who is very familiar with the post-secondary world. For those who don't know, Brent is a professor, I believe, Brent, at George Brown College. Yeah.
And Algonquin College.
And Algonquin College.
Yeah.
So Brent, I'm going to ask you to defend your answer here. What's your thought?
So I put that first, obviously, because I do a lot of work giving back to academia, and why I think the going back to school was my first choice is that it gives the opportunity for real-time conversational learning with those that carry industry-based experience. So, you could Google, and I'm a Googler. My kids are Googlers. I could find stuff, but I'm always finding an instance of items. Whereas the delivery of a course allows us to both. I always say it's like I'm a storyteller to my students, and I can actually build assignments around the actual real tasks that I've seen BIM VDC coordinators have to deal with over the course of my 20 years. So I think that experience, that interaction, so the access to experience and the ability to interact with the experienced in a live manner is why I put that as my first choice.
And I think that's a very fair, response. And just so that everyone is aware, it's not like Brent only said continuing back to education. All the panelists said all of these are options. All of these are legitimate paths. Just what their thoughts were on why one path might be more advantageous for others. Now, for some of these answers, I wasn't able to get some of Laura's responses. For those who don't know, Laura is very busy today. She is doing all kinds of crazy schemes with the Revisto team and doing very well at it. But Laura, I'm going to ask for your input. What's where do you lean of these 4 options?
I had a hard time deciding because I think they're all viable, and I believe they really depend on where somebody is currently coming from. Like, I love the idea of like continuing education for all the reasons that were just said, because it's like the great structure, but sometimes that's just not an option. And again, the same with the employer. Sometimes that's hard to. I agree with B too. This is the thing. I agree with it, and that would be great. But sometimes that's also not provided, and it's hard to maybe even convince an employer to get that. Whereas A and C doesn't seem like the great one, but that's a lot of where I would say most of us started.
And that's a very good point. because I think a lot of us, one way or another, and it was a theme in the beginning when you guys were all talking about how you pivoted, it was a combination of a lot of these paths, right? As well as, even though no one put it as their first pick, like learning on your own time was almost everyone's second pick. So maybe, Dylan, I'm going to pick on you. You kind of, I think from your answers, you were kind of on the fence between learning on your own time and training through your employer. So why'd you pick training through your employer?
I picked it because I believe that a lot of that should be built around the conversation and relationship with your employer. Like, it should be something that you guys kind of mutually agree upon for the added benefit. There's interest in both parties to have it succeed.
No, and I think that's very fair. And Chetna, is that the similar reasoning for yourself? Why you kind of thought that training through your employer should be the first go-to if you're looking for that direction?
Yeah, I think what happens is, I speak from experience. So I never ever wanted to be a BIM professional. I wanted to be a licensed architect. I wanted to be Zaha Hadid. Even today, is my idol. It was through my employer and through my manager and through the opportunities given at work is when I realized that I have a potential to be really good with technology. I have a potential that I can do really good in this field, and I just kept on getting better and better. Also, I just want to add to this is that for the employers, I know it's hard, especially with pandemic and things that are going in the industry, and with so much movement. Like, people don't stay at a job for long. They don't see value in training their employees, and then you don't know if they're going to stay for give their investment back to them. I always go back to this quote that one of the trainers at McDonald's said, that I know, if you do not train your employees, if you train your employees and they leave, that's a loss. But what if you don't train them and they stay, right? So I always, and I mean, I'm also a little more biased towards it because that's my bread and butter. I train employers, I train people through employers, and that's where the maximum, they learn and they have the result right away. So I think that's the best path to go. Going back to school is not an option for most of the people who are working full time.
And I just want to add, if that's cool, A was what I had to do. So, 2 decades ago, there was nothing in continuing education. So I was learning on my own. The development, so I had the opportunity with Algonquin College to actually develop the course, to make it available. And I'm going to call out Safra Yunus's comment there. I don't know if I was one of the guest lecturers at her GBC class, but that was my first intro to George Brown. And as I was able to just have 1 or 2 hour sessions with architectural or engineering technology students, I was able to expose them to the possibilities of BIM and then potentially bring them down other paths. So yeah, great comment in the chat there.
And no, I think that it certainly resonates with myself as being a SAIT graduate. I know the program and the structure of the program is not identical to some of the programs at George Brown, but I definitely had that same experience of being a student there. And when you could have an instructor, someone like yourself, Brent, come in that didn't necessarily have all the answers, but definitely knew how to connect with the students that wanted to be going that extra step in technology. It was always a treasure. And Brent, it sounds like you were probably this inspiration for Safra.
I hope so. And I got another student commented there too, so I'm not going to call them all out, but Pranav, rock on. Sorry, go on.
And then next thing I'm going to do is going to jump to Marcellus. Just want to get your comments quickly. Why did you, because is it because of your own experience that like you really got that extra leg up by going and doing those night classes, that you put it as your kind of your first choice?
Yeah, Tom, and I think that's kind of why my answer was positioned the way that it is because that was my experience, and I think whenever we're asked any sorts of questions like this, the best thing to do is just explain what worked for you and let people who are listening to the answer take that into consideration and formulate their own opinions rather than someone saying this is the best way. So my reasoning for choosing that, obviously for the reasons I just explained, is I look at continuing education as something through the lens of being able to actually do flexible studies because those options are available, and that's kind of how I look at it, is not leaving my job, but actually just supplementing my current workload with part-time studies or anything like that. And the reason why I like going back to school, so to speak, or doing post-secondary certificates or courses is that material is very, very focused and tailored to capture everything that's relevant into the industry. And I think that does give a really high quality experience of education. And then pivoting from that to going to an employer and saying, hey, this is something I'm very interested in. These are some of the steps that I've taken to show that passion and that interest. And I wanted to point out a question that one of the LinkedIn users posted, is that their dream is to work as a VDC coordinator. That spirit right there is exactly one of the things that are really important. And I think taking a step where you do post-secondary education really helps support and show that you've done the work. You've got skin in the game already. You're ready to jump into this, rather than saying, hey, this seems cool. This is something I think I'd like to try. You've already put the work in. You know that you liked it. You spent your money on learning it. So that's kind of the reason why I've chose that sort of approach.
No, and I think that's fair, and I also want to echo that there's no one right way to pivot, but these are the experiences of our panelists, and for those that might be listening that are looking for that inroad, hopefully there's something that might resonate with you during the discussion. So next, we're just gonna kind of jump to the chat briefly. There's a couple questions that are in here. We got a doozy here. Hello panel, I want to ask the following question. Can a project management profession background person switch to be a VDC professional? Just to kind of deal with that first part of that question, is there anyone on the panel that wants to take a stab at it?
I'm going to jump in if that's cool, because maybe I'm stealing the thunder for one of the subsequent questions. But one of the biggest things that are of importance, I think, for a BIM or VDC professional is familiarity and understanding of project management, and being able to be in tune with the scope, schedule, budget of a project, to speak to the value of technology, to speak to what specifics the technology and the BIM process or VDC process brings to the specific scope of the tasks at hand, and to be able to communicate with stakeholders. And all of that is a subsidiary of project management, and is just so vehemently important.
I'd like to echo that. I think that understanding the utility that BIM provides really, really makes your learning experience and your execution as a VDC coordinator much more effective. I couldn't agree more.
I also want to add to that, and I think Brent would remember back in IBI when I was on my journey to become a BIM professional, I took the night classes as like foundations for project management, and it kind of enhanced my understanding of what all our internal programs, the training programs. I think the Brent prepared like a full BIM program inside IBI. Like the whole course made much more sense when I attended those project management night classes, that yes, there is a cost attached to it. You need to know what your BIM scope is. You need to know, what timeline are we going to give to this particular job in this particular project. So I think if somebody has a project management, project coordination background, they're going to do extremely well with BIM coordination role, VDC coordination role.
That's a good point, because you can obviously take those courses for project management, and I think they're probably a bit easier to find than VDC courses, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So just in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to our next question. I see that there's a lot of comments for this particular question, but some of them I think we're going to get answered just in the next coming questions. So this is exactly what we're talking about. So my question to the panel is kind of a pointed one. Many of you took issue with me asking this question, but the reason why I ask it is because that is the question that I always get asked. Everyone wants to know, what software should you learn? Like, if let's say you are a design or construction professional, and you're very good at your job, you want to pivot into more of that role, or you're a brand new graduate, you just want to break into that role with no real experience. What's your guys' thoughts? What software or skills are needed to break into this industry?
I'll jump.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I'll go first. That's cool. So when I kind of listed 5, and for me, there's like an order of importance. And again, the first one is project management software. So some form of ERP, some form of an ability to understand how to manage schedule, understanding scopes, etc., and understanding the impact on the overall delivery of that final product. The product being a building, a road, a bridge, whatever it is. The next tier, I said data manipulation, Power BI, M365, Tableau, whatever. I don't care where the data comes from, there's data. And one of the biggest problems is the digitization of the practice in the industry and how do you bring it all together. Next tier, I said collaboration, so specifically BIM collaboration. So your ACC, BIM 360, your ProjectWises, and others. Next tier, coordination, your Navisworks, your Navigator, your Solibri, you're getting in the modeling side, your Revisto. I want to bring all of these geometries with their information together and enact and do tasks. And then the last tier is BIM authoring. And I did this, when I put that list, I very deliberately did that because often people jump and say, okay, BIM coordinator, I better learn Revit. Well, I would hire someone with the first 4 first. And then Revit, I'll teach you Revit. I'll teach you other competitors. So when I say BIM authoring, your Revit, your Open Buildings, your ArchiCAD, your Open Plant, your Inroads, your Civil 3D, all of them, right? So which BIM authoring, depending on your industry, depending on your project, it could be the plethora of all of that. But all of those are going to give you models and data, which we need to do stuff with as BIM coordinators. I'll stop.
I like your answer. That is much more comprehensive than I was thinking. But to build on that idea, I think a good tactic is for people to reach out, whether it be through cold calling the companies or just reaching out to employees from a company and just asking, hey, what software platforms are you guys using? And start learning those, and maybe use that as an approach of what software skills might be needed, because you're identifying exactly what is relevant in the industry right now from actual research and raw data.
I think mostly like what Brent has said is a very ideal path, but mostly people go from where he ended. Mostly people start with BIM authoring. And I love to bring attention to myself. I was hired because I knew one particular BIM authoring tool, the most popular BIM authoring tool. I was moved into BIM team because I was good at that software. I kind of train in that software for most of the time. But yes, I always say that this is like, if say for example you're going to work for an architecture company, maybe for them authoring comes before the data manipulation. Authoring comes before the coordination. So if they are working within a company and they still don't have any BIM authoring tool, it does not matter which one, but start with something. And then just don't stop on that particular software. I started with Revit, but now I'm self-learning ArchiCAD. I'm self-learning Vectorworks. And I know that I might not be working for an architect for the longest period of time, but just learning those software helps understand the data, the information part of it so well that really reaching the last part, if I go, I'm going to just reverse the order that Brent said. He mentioned that, if we are going to the topmost level, and actually people who can do the data manipulation and all of that, those are the most highly paid professionals in the industry. Right.
And I'll say starting somewhere obviously is important. When I do my classes, I think the first sentence I utter is BIM is not Revit and Revit's not BIM. So let's talk about everything that can be from an authoring perspective and what do we want to do. And when I give my first assignments, my students either love me or hate me for it. I say, tell me how we're going to plan and collaborate around this type of project. And I say, imagine you have a building with a little bit of Revit, a little bit of open buildings, a little bit of ArchiCAD, 5 disciplines, 5 different authoring tools. What would we do? How do we share? How do we bring all the geometry together? And how do we harness the information? And they say to me, oh, that doesn't really happen. And I say, oh, hey, it most definitely happens. And I just list the history of my projects. So that's what I try to expose people to.
It's interesting that you say that, Brent, because I listening to a lot of this stuff, I called Tom originally when you sent those questions and I was kind of like, what the hey, man? Like, how dare you?
Everyone thought I was trying to start a fight, which I was. I
Right.
was very much trying to do that.
When I look at that though, like to kind of echo off everybody's stuff though, when I looked at this is we all have a process that we go through, and behind the process, there's always data. And when I look at software skills, it would be, can you understand the process? And can you understand how the software works in meshing those two together? Because that's where you really begin to shine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree. And I kind of viewed it as software can be really prohibitive cost-wise, especially if you're learning. How do you get access to some of the softwares that most of the industry uses, and it's hard to get away from that. So my thought is start anywhere that you can, right? Getting it from 2D into a 3D view and understanding that is really a good way to just start. Most software skills are transferable. Like so many people on the panel here learned various ones because they had a general understanding. Understanding the data for sure in it is immensely helpful, because then you can extract it regardless of what software it is. Mm-hmm. I love everybody's comment here and how moving that information from one authoring software to another place is so important. What's important for the architect is totally different for the GC down the line. So yeah, having that skill to just kind of wrap your head around the larger concept, I think would be fantastic.
And on that note, I want to go to one of the questions we have in the chat, which is very relevant to the point that Laura and a few others have been making. And that's William Thompson. He's asking, do you see any difference between the pathway and demand for BIM VDC professionals with consultancies and general contractors / construction managers versus the specialty subcontractors? I think that's a great question. Is there anyone on the panel that has, and obviously nothing is a hard and fast rule, but do you see trends on greater, relevance for certain platforms or certain understanding of how these platforms need to interact that are different for the contractor than for the consultant?
I'm going to jump on the tail end of that one, Tom. Which contractors? I would say a lot of it, but for my experience, would be like your MEP contractors. They stand to win the largest amount out there. The amount of hours spent on a field level when those conversations could have taken place in this in a digital environment. you can really win. But it does require some discipline to put your expertise out there.
And it's important for those contractors to not be handcuffed by the designer's BIM authoring tool.
Right.
And I had this happen a lot of times. Hey, the design's being done in Revit, but I can do my sprinkler piping very well in SolidWorks. So do it. Let's make it all come together. And then you just hear all the software specific potential challenges of things coming together. Whereas you should take the perspective, different purposes, different uses, and they will come together. We have ability to make that happen.
Well, and I think, you know, not to beat it at horse with conflating a specific platform with the industry of BIM itself. But I think one thing that I would also say is, Brent, going back to your hierarchy that you had for like project management softwares and the different sort of priorities that in your mind are most critical. Do you think that changes between contractor and designer, or do you think that that's a pretty consistent, you know, job management hierarchy?
For me, it would be consistent because I boil it all down to scope, schedule, budget. And in order to actually define that, you need to go through, in my head, that hierarchy. It'll mold itself very differently, obviously, for a subcontractor versus a subconsultant versus the owner. But it all has to be about managing what we're doing, understanding the information, and then how do we share, how do we coordinate, and then how do we make? And it all comes together.
No, that sounds like a very, very fair reasoning. So I actually, just for those who don't know, I actually was able through my research to find, for all those who are asking in the chat, I was able to find the go-to best way to be a BIM, to move into BIM and VDC. It's a secret that not a lot of people know. It's just a little clip that I'm going to share with everyone because I think it really highlights the perfect way, and is everything that the panelists are saying is great, but this way is I think the only true way to get into BIM and VDC. Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna run around and desert you, never gonna make. Yeah, so as you I got you guys. No, it's. I hope for everyone who is joining us in the chat, and thank you so much for engaging through the chat. There are countless different ways to break into this industry. There is no right way. I just want to echo, many of the things that Laura said. What works for one person in their situation is not going to work for another. But I hope you've heard from the discussion, there are multiple routes. There is. If you are facing that thing where someone is telling you like, no, there's no way to get into that, short of you should have gone to school for that sort of thing. That's just not the reality. There's so many different avenues to get into BIM and VDC. So don't let yourself get rickrolled with the perfect answer there. So we're gonna move on to again, yeah. If you do have recommendations from the chat, please throw that in there. What software platforms or learning strategies or skills did you attain, and what helped you in your own career move closer to that role that you were looking for? So next, I want to kind of switch the question away from the people that are trying to get into BIM and VDC, and let's talk about the people that are trying to get people to come to BIM and VDC, whether that's organizations that have to fill those roles, or whether they're recruitment agencies that are trying to find these capable individuals. The demand is crazy right now, and there's been a lot of discussions of, are we looking for the right people, and are we asking the right questions? Is this recruitment strategy need to be adjusted for BIM and VDC? So I kind of broke down the 4 categories that most employers, when they're trying to hire a specialized skill, they have to deal with one of these 4, look in one of these 4 categories. And that's, someone who doesn't know anything. It's a clean slate, but this person is going to be very cheap. provided you don't break the bank training them and bringing them up to speed on what your business is. And then there's people that have extensive industry experience, whether that's the design or construction, but they lack BIM experience. They don't know the softwares, or they haven't really started down any of the paths that we discussed in the previous section. Those people are going to be a little bit more expensive. And then there's the reverse of that, where you have people that don't have a ton of experience, maybe in your specific industry, whether that's design or construction or management, but they have profound BIM experience or technology experience, and they have that background. So what I did, and then of course there's the person that has everything you need, tons of experience, and they're just, you know, the perfect candidate. But the problem that employers or recruiters face with that is that person is much more expensive to hire. So what I asked our panelists to talk about was, how would you advise a small to medium firm, not a firm that the firms that are big enough already have BIM departments, right? Like firms that are just maybe want to transition, or they're trying to build a BIM department. Those small to medium-sized firms and construction companies or contractors, how would you advise them to kind of focus their recruitment efforts? So Chetna said the focus needs to be on having industry knowledge and training the technology. Brent gave kind of a two-sided answer. He said that obviously these people that have both are, you know, those are incredibly valuable, and they can then be mentors to the people below them, right? So if they have the right background and balance of being both a construction and a technology expert, they can mentor those people that maybe lack those skills in that area. Marcellus also put the focus on having industry experience and then learning the technology. Dylan, you put a two-sided answer, and I demand that you explain yourself. So
okay, I'll bite at that. I think when you're looking at bringing this type of skill set into your business, that you can find yourself with one or the other, being the lacks BIM knowledge, you know, experienced industry professional, or the understands the BIM technology process but doesn't have the industry experience. I think that there's a bit of a sweet spot there, potentially, depending on how well your organization's situated, where you can marry those people together, and you can have a collaborative experience. The way I look at like the lacks BIM knowledge, lacks industry knowledge, is that's going to be a lot of heavy lifting potentially right out the gate. Although it might be cheaper, it's going to come at a cost in other ways.
No, and that's very fair. And I don't know if there's anyone else on the panel that has that comment. I have myself, and I think many of us maybe have experienced this, seen organizations or teams try to solve the problem with that cheapest quadrant there.
Yeah.
Can anyone speak to some of the risks you encounter with that?
Yeah, I think if you're in that bottom left quadrant, you're just opening the door for the risk of failure and the higher likelihood of it. So my answer, the reason I kind of straddled the two, is just seeing both at CH2M Hill, IBI Group, and now here at Turner Fleischer, the value of that professional. So I'm here as CTO. I do have a very senior person in our digital practice department. I now have the freedom to recruit any of the other three boxes. And some will come better, so like a comp designer with some good architectural background, or a comp designer with heavy technology but just out of school. We're our new software developer, one of them, zero architecture, but just awesome computer science. So myself and my senior, so the top right quadrant, we can completely mold, develop, and drive and remove the risk of somebody in that bottom left completely from a different industry. But I think it just opens up the door to find the right fit when recruiting in those other three quadrants when you have the top right in place.
I agree with Dylan a lot there. I've seen it where, especially in the trades that, you know, they have those experienced people who've been doing it for years, and but they, their computer skills are a little bit lacking. Getting that person that's right out of school, who's got like the training, they have the know-how and the drive with the software, having them paired up makes a great teamwork. And then you get kind of the combo of them, of that top corner where they fill in the gaps, and then they both become like the green team there.
Again, I'm going to again speak from experience here. So last year we launched a BIM professional training program at BIMWise. There were 2 people who enrolled into that, both invested in themselves. They were both the CAD technicians, one from a manufacturing company, one from a small general contractor. They knew the industry, they knew the how stuff is done, and they were not very, very young. They were about the same age as I am, and I'm not going to reveal my age here, but they were by the way, last week I turned 38, so that's fine, but they were about the same age I am, and they were really good with learning the software, learning the data. How actually I feel the people who know the industry, who know the trade, who know whatever specific discipline, they understand data much better than a fresh graduate, because they know that what is relevant, what do we need to extract, do we really need a complex geometry from a part that we just need the pressure rating to? Do we really need it? No. So those people actually added to my understanding about what I understand of BIM and VDC. So I think software training of a willing person is not a difficult task, but somebody who does not have a lot of industry experience, they're good with like you said, like a junior role and mentoring them to understand the industry. But if there is a small company, I would say one of their job captains, a senior person who knows the trade, go train them. They will be an asset.
Yeah, and I think, Chetna, I definitely have found many situations where I've had to explain something very similar, to the individuals that you work with that are, again, and we all kind of tend to put things in boxes and tend to not really think about how those skills and deficiencies can be connected, and to what other people, like Laura was saying, you can build the green team without having to hire the package deal all at once. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I want to just really, I love your comment about how it's difficult sometimes for a new grad to understand data, not just the data of their project, but data in general. And that comes really, I believe that understanding of the importance of data comes from experience, because you learn the cost of data, or you learn the impact. Like, what do these data points mean? What difference does it make to my work? I see Dylan chuckling. Dylan, do you have an experience that echoes that? Do you understand the importance of data?
I was just thinking back to when you first started coming out of SAIT there, and one of your opening comments was, "Can I have 2 years of my life back?" It's interesting to once you get diving into it and you start to begin to understand the strings and how everything gets connected, you see how powerful it is and how influential it can be, and it's super easy. Sometimes I think people get lost in the weeds of their passion, to not stop, take a breath, go up, look at what the whole spread of what's going on, and realize that they're right in the mix of it.
And it's so important understanding the value and the importance of the data and making it relatable to the actual scope. And I think back to my career. So I'm a licensed architect. So knowing how the data supports what I'm professionally liable to deliver was extremely beneficial. And I had fellow engineers at CH2M Hill. We spoke the same language, right? We understood how the data was bettering what we were delivering and how it brought automations and efficiencies to produce what we otherwise would have had to produce without it. So it just made it better. And that fundamental betterment opens the door for all the other potentials. The biggest mistake I see in the whole world of BIM and VDC is when people come in and say, oh, with BIM, you can do life cycle, this, that, connect to asset management. Oh, yeah, it's all great. But I'm an architect and I'm making drawings, and you're telling me I can make a digital twin for somebody 10 years from now, and I just got to make a drawing a month from now. Doesn't add up. Let it relate first, and then it opens the door for the potential. And that's all in dialogue plan. That's nothing software related. That's how do you convey the potential and the value in ways that it's understandable to the stakeholder.
And I'm assuming that's dialogue, the human activity, not dialogue your competitor. I hope you're not your competitor here.
Human activity, yes.
No, I think also I just want to make a quick comment for everyone who's joining us through the live session. Marcellus Gotel, one of our panelists, is still on the line. He is in transit, but he was still he was still able to fit in this session, so he is on the line. He's just in transit and he's not able to be sharing his camera with us. Marcellus, you still alive there, man?
No.
Oh, we lost him. Well, he can hear. He takes.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. I don't think I heard the question before. Could you guys just repeat it?
We're just checking to make sure. I was just letting everyone know that you're in transit, checking to make sure you're still alive.
Perfect. I'm here.
Yeah. The next question actually, before we go to that, do we have any comments in the chat? Does anyone have their own, experience of trying to recruit that BIM or VDC professional and some of those same challenges resonating with them? Joe, I might have missed it. Were there any comments similar to that in the chat?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's lots of good stuff going on. But some of it I think we might push to the end, to the end of the question and answer session.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that. Again, like if you have, if we're not able to, like you get your question in too late, like we move to the next item and you just miss us with your question. Like Joe said, we're gonna try to circle back to as many of these questions at the Q&A as possible. So please, if you have relevant questions to this question or ones that came before, please just throw them in the chat. The next question here is, where is the hiring struggle? So on the same note of recruitment, that question of recruitment, many people use, and this is a chart that is very similar to dozens of similar charts of the recruitment through onboarding, like the full life cycle recruitment cycle. So I asked all of our panelists to kind of give their opinion. All these people both had to be hired themselves as BIM or VDC professionals and have had to hire others. And so they have both experienced that or consult on the hiring of others. So I kind of went through with the panelists and got their thoughts on where they thought the struggle is. And Dylan, just to kind of start off with you, you said that the struggle is onboarding. Yeah,
I was torn between onboarding and screening, but onboarding, if you bring somebody in and particularly they may have a strong skill set, if they're not onboarded properly, that can be a really difficult transition for them to, feel like they can come in, provide the value that they're looking to do. And without a strong onboarding setup, you can struggle a lot, and they can you know, you can all suffer from that, and that's not what you want.
No, I think that's very fair, and it's unfortunate because onboarding can cause a lot of damage. At least in that initial, utility of that person's contributions can be somewhat lessened depending on how their onboarding is handled. It can all, and the reverse is also true. A really well-developed, streamlined onboarding process, and individuals engaged through the onboarding process can make a huge difference. Marcellus, I don't know if you want to take a stab at this one. You were for where is the hiring struggle? You said sourcing. I don't know if you wanted to maybe comment on that. Oh, I don't know if don't think we can hear Marcellus. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, it looks like I was added now. So I think the reason I said it's sourcing is I think the biggest challenge is just simply finding the people, because I believe it's easy to train. It's easy to leverage one of the skill sets to supplement the other. Like, for example, if someone has a strong skill set in project management, understanding of construction means and methods, then it's easy to help them learn the software, or vice versa. If they're strong in the software, or you know, if they're a programming graduate, they can learn the fundamentals of construction. But I think the struggle lies in finding or sourcing that person. Looking through the lens of, well, what's the best candidate, and trying to figure out which one we go with. So that's kind of where I was coming from with sourcing.
No, I think that's very fair. It's, and your there's one other panelist that I'm curious to hear their reasoning, because they put sourcing as their prime culprit as well, and that's Brent. Brent, do you have similar reasoning from where Marcellus is coming from?
Yeah, it's similar. You know, both at IBI Group and here at Turner Fleischer, I spent a lot of time with the recruiting team to plant the seeds in the right location to find the available candidates. So I try to use, obviously, where the places I teach, but you know, what agencies, what websites, how do you get the word out there that there's something specific I may be looking for that's unique within this whole BIM process, that, you know, it's different from a, I was going to say standard, but just from a standard designer, if you will. Back at CH2M Hill, because it was like a 25,000 person firm, there was a lot of internal recruiting, and that was interesting as well, to find those who are interested but already under the umbrella. And then as I've gotten smaller and smaller firms, it's finding those interested parties outside. And the challenge for me, like I do a lot of effort in preparing the job description. So trying to state explicitly the skills I'm looking for and the capabilities. And then I work heavily at screening and selecting with the recruiters. So the sourcing piece for me is the hardest, because it's out of our, like, I can't do anything about that. I could just put the stuff out there and hope for the candidates, and that makes it very challenging.
No, and I think there's you know, there certainly is, it feels like the perception is that there is a lack of marketplaces in which these individuals are easy to find, or which these individuals are easy to engage. I think for some other better established careers, there's sometimes a little bit easier doors to knock on than BIM and VDC. And I'll get to this point a little bit later, but that might have something to do. I'll ask you guys, does that have something to do with the organizations or the communities for BIM and VDC? Because just to go back here a little bit, I just want to scroll back through the presentation to that initial question of best paths to pivot. So we were talking more pivoting into BIM and VDC, but regardless of which way you rank, the discussions and the questions, there seemed to be a lot of people that did not want to put, joining a BIM and VDC community organization as their top pick for pivoting into BIM and VDC. I guess my question to the panel is that the same for hiring? Like, is it very difficult to find these organizations and these communities? Like, I don't know if anyone has comment on that.
I'd say like the community should be tapped for potential hiring. So when we look at the sourcing, and I'll say professional organizations, BIM communities, both local, provincial, and national, which are however they exist, and schools. So we'll get different levels of potential candidates, and really it's about opening the doors for the variety of sources, right? I want to get bombarded with applicants. I don't want to be begging for applicants.
And then just kind of playing off that question, maybe Dylan or Laura, for either of you, do you think there's a lack of sufficient BIM communities and organizations? Is there just a lack of these centers for these professionals, either aspiring BIM and VDC professionals or current professionals, to congregate?
I wouldn't say necessarily no, it's what they provide. And they all provide something a little bit different. So for myself and the ones that I'm part of, they all contribute something differently. Some are very focused on education, which is fantastic. You want to get signed up with them. I've subscribed to a number of them because some are really great with the social community, and you can get a lot of just one-on-one great conversation with an in-person virtual person, and you can get a lot from that as instead of maybe as prescribed community and courses. But I think they're all valuable, to be honest, and I totally recommend signing up for any ones that are local. Virtually is great too. Yeah, I think they do provide a lot of value, especially for the people that are wanting to know where to start. That is definitely where to ask.
And Dylan, same question to you. Like, and I know, like to Laura's point, there's lots of different types of communities and organizations. Some are more for things like networking, professional certification. There's very social ones. A lot of us are probably part of informal BIM communities or virtual design and construction communities. But what's your thought, Dylan? Is there a lack of these communities in our industry?
I don't think that there's a lack of them. I think that there, in some points, you need to be aware of what kind of community you're joining and what it's going to offer you. I think it's very easy to put your effort not necessarily in the right direction that supports you as well as you'd like. Is really where there's so much conversation there that has potential. Is it what benefits you?
No, I think that's a fantastic point. And I haven't forgot about you, Chetna. I'm jumping back. I just think that the conversation was kind of moving there and I wanted to jump back there. But Chetna, you gave two answers to this question. You said screening and selecting. What was your reasoning for saying that's where the struggle is? Why is that the pinch point?
So actually recently I've helped a couple of small scale architecture and electrical engineering companies to help recruit the BIM coordinators. And we've put the ad out, we've had recruiters come in with the candidates. The problem is the skill set that we want, everybody says we have that, but when we put an actual test together and a questionnaire together, and so that at least they know some basics before we move them into the next phase, a lot of them don't deliver. So we feel that this is the reality, and I don't know, not many people would want to talk about it, but a lot of people would look at the job posting and they would tweak their resume accordingly, right? They would put the skill set required, even if they've attended like one online session of, let's say, Navisworks, they would say proficient in Navisworks. Doesn't cut it. And when you put like an actual test together that, this role is going to require you to work on Navisworks all the time, they just don't even know how to create like discipline sets, and I'm talking about very, very like basic things that we want candidates to pass. So when there is, and when we screen them, there has been it's really a struggle that candidate A is really good with I'm going to go back to the quadrant thing. Candidate A is very good with the software part of things, but does not understand the electrical engineering that well, or they understand the electrical engineering that well, but they don't understand the software part of it. So that's where a couple of my clients, they struggle that, how do we select this? And then that's why my vote was that, select a person who understands your discipline well and can at least navigate the software, and we will get them to learn to the software even in more detail. So yeah, but once we've gotten through that process, and again, I'm going to advocate for all the BIM consultants here that they actually do help small and medium-sized companies to design an onboarding process, design a hiring process, which bigger companies actually, they do have an in-house department that does for them, but a 10-people company would not have it. So a lot of BIM consultants actually do that for them. So I think, and I'm all my answers are keeping in mind the kind of clients I deal with. Those are the companies that are less than 50 people, and that's their biggest struggle.
And I'm gonna just go to Brent on that note. Brent, do you see that, because the way Chetan is kind of describing it is an issue of having a system in place for screening and to be able to adequately, narrow down your selection process. Is that an issue of preparation, though, to Chetna's point? Like, is that, because you said you were torn between sourcing and prep, or you work a lot with the preparation side of things.
Correct.
Do you see a lot of those issues being resolved in the preparation phase?
No, screening is still a challenge. So I can prepare the role as well as I believe I have. Chetna's spot on in that the way people portray themselves, the screening process has to have a level of validation for what's being stated within the resume, or within the resume. Part of the work that I'm going to be doing now with our recruiting is to figure out how to better our screening. So it's not a matter of saying, okay, those first 3-4 weeks of employment is now screening, right? They should come and they should be effective. So we want to make sure that we do the best we can to screen, understanding the pressures of interviewing and the pressures of understanding candidates. But that is a challenge. And in my past, I've experimented with the Knowledge Smart system for online testing. We've developed tests at IBI Group, here at Turner Fleischer, previously at CH2M Hill. So what would we have a candidate do, or what would you have someone do in their first week to then mold a training regime to get them where they have to do to fill those gaps that not, because all candidates won't have everything, right? And I always say, sorry, just one more. You may be low in a certain aspect of what we would train you on. That doesn't mean you're not fit for the job. That just means you need to be trained on something. And to make that first week or two the most effective, I don't want to guess what that training is. I would rather somebody say, you know what, I completely failed. You asked me to open up Revit, give you the elevation of level 2. I don't know how to do that. But my goodness, can I put a building design together? You know what? That's a higher worthy person. We'll teach you how to find the elevation of a level in Revit. I don't care. You know design. So it's finding that right balance.
Well, and I think if there's been a theme at all throughout the many different points that have come up again in these discussions, that is complementary skills, right? And I think for many of the people listening and signed into the live session, be aware, but also be honest. Obviously, as Chetna said, there's putting your best foot forward, and then there's misleading the people that you have to work with, right? And we see the memes all the time where person lies in their resume and then have to do a job they're not prepared for. But that's not what we're really getting at here. We're getting at here both for employers, recruiters, and for applicants that there's a discussion within this industry moving towards complementary skills and proficiencies. Laura, going back to you, where do you see on this chart maybe not the biggest struggle, but where do the struggles seem to happen most frequently?
See, and I took a different view with this one, which made it more difficult to think on an answer. But recently I've encountered a lot of very, very small companies. They've won a contract and they're required to provide BIM. And all of a sudden now they need somebody to do that. And they throw an ad out there that for most of us in this room makes no sense. And we're like, who are they hiring? 20 years experience and all these skills and softwares. And that person rarely exists. And so who's applying for that, and how? I had a hard time even coming up where this would even sit on that, because are they going to the BIM consultancy and saying, hey, how do I even write an ad for this? And then we have all our folks over in the comments section going maybe to these interviews and getting asked questions that they can't answer because they're being hired by an HR person who has not put out a great ad. So I think there can be a very wide disconnect. This is great for the companies that have the systems, who have, probably, Brett's already on there, and Dylan and yourself, and these great hiring processes and people within their own companies already to ask. So yeah, I see that right now as one of the biggest struggles, because there is such a wide gap there, and I don't have an answer on how to bridge that.
And I just want to tack on, that's a good point. If you're going into interviews to the audience and HR is trying to hire you, I would put that from your perspective as being a flag. So whether it's a BIM VDC person, whether it's an architectural designer, structural designer, whatever, you've got to have interaction with those you're going to work with. So, at Turner Fleischer, doesn't matter our department. If the job is interiors, the interiors person is interviewing and helped to prepare the job, the posting, and is working with HR. HR can do the legwork, but there's no way I would look to HR and say, hire me a BIM coordinator, and walk away. And if you go into an interview where that's clearly the case, that's a red flag for even you as a potential employee or them as a potential employer.
Yeah, I wanted to second that. I think the important thing is that if the HR hiring representative has any uncertainties, it's very, very important that they're very proactive and clarify anything that they don't understand. It would almost be a good idea to have the HR representative interviewed so that they can demonstrate that they're able to explain the requirements of the position in layman's terms, so that they can themselves identify the appropriate candidate. Just a side thought.
No, I think that's a great idea, and Marcellus, I think there's a number of people in this room or in this call that would be very excited if they got to pick who was going after or who was recruiting their future BIM managers. Dylan, just to pick on you one more time, do you find that when the recruiter or someone from HR, someone is coming to you like it's their responsibility. This is how the system within your organization may or may not work. Do you find that they ask the right questions, or do they fixate on things like software, like those questions we were talking about earlier in the discussion?
I find it is commonly drawn towards software instead of, looking at the broader skill set instead, and the overall understanding the overall intent and value of what we try to do and bring to projects. Instead, it's more like, well, can you check the software box? And I mean, that's always something, those are teachable skills is the way I look at it. I mean, if you need to hire for that, then great, and make it known, but there's far more out there that's valuable in the broader sense of what we do.
Yeah, no, I think that's should definitely be the theme of today, is that software is not where you want to, is not the hill you want to die on. If this is a career you want to move into, and this is a role you want to pursue, anyone on the line listening, do not fixate on the software, but understand how that software plays into the role you want to move into, right? And just going back to this main question, I just want to jump to some of these recruitment comments and questions we have in the chat. So we have our first one from Pranav. Sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I would just like to have a comment by someone who's had experience in hiring people. I think one can gain BIM knowledge through self-learning or taking a course, but the industry experience can only be gained in a practical sense. So what kind of candidates are more common in the job pool? What kind of candidates do you guys usually have to interview? Panelists, what is your response to this question?
Can I jump on this first?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Chetna.
Okay, so 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when I was the only person in BIMWise, somebody from an architecture graduate, a couple of years experience, international student, comes up to me through a reference and says she wants to work for me for free because she's really interested in BIM. I was like, okay, first of all, I don't have money to pay you, but also I cannot hire somebody for free. So I told her that bring me any one project, learn yourself in this so-and-so software. I will see how you do that work. She brought that back in 1.5 weeks. She did not employ the right tools in the software, but I was blown away by the product that she brought in, right? She has been, and I have trained her personally. We've gone through so many ups and downs, and like I say that she's my soulmate in BIMWise. Just a couple of just last week, she has moved on to another role in another company, and I've wished her all the best. And she is like one of the best assets gone. And I always say this, that and she shared her recruitment process with me, and she said that, you know what, I think Revit was one of the smallest things I learned while working with you. What I learned was how to talk to clients, how to get the requirements, how to be best in what I can do, and how to learn something new. That's also a skill set that not many people know, that how to learn something new. So I think we can all take a chance on people who have the right mindset and who can produce what you want, and just treat them with a lot of respect, which I feel a lot of employers also don't do. They don't treat their employees with a lot of respect. So if you do that, I'm going to give a lot of this credit to Brent, because I've gotten a lot of that respect from him, and I've kind of tried to channel it further. I mean, I've always been somebody who's had a lot of imposter syndrome, if they say that, okay, I don't think I know this. Am I, too good? But okay, if somebody is hiring, pick up the person who can do beyond their realm. They will definitely deliver.
Thank you, Chetna. And I just wanted to add, so Pranav is another one of my former students that are on here. And, not everyone will hire the same way, unfortunately. But, in our course, some of the deliberate things I would do is throw the curveballs at you and say, okay, look, how do you deal with a project with multiple softwares, multiple locations, multiple buildings and roads, etc.? How do you bring it all together? I come in when I'm interviewing my candidates, and I'll hear, tell me about yourself. I know how to do Revit. Okay, awesome. Have you heard of open buildings? Have you heard of ArchiCAD? Have you heard of Intro? And I throw all this up because I want to hear the breadth of the knowledge from an industry-wide perspective. How do you deal with a civil consultant? If you tell me you've designed buildings, well, what do you do with the non-building portions that impact the design? And just try to see what the overall perspective is. Most of my candidates will come in, just to try to answer the question a little more directly, Pranav, most of the candidates will come in saying, I know a piece of software. And great, tell me about the software. I'll celebrate what you know, but I will dig in the questions to find out what more you know, or what you know beyond the realm of the software. So I think I said in our class, if you tell me you know Revit, and then you tell me the entire BIM process is constrained to the capabilities of Revit, no, I'm not going to hire you. All my students will know I won't hire you if you say that. But if you tell me I know Revit and boom, here's how I can extend my knowledge, we got something awesome.
No, I think that's I remember this was when I first got on to LinkedIn. I was making some BIM flashcards for our company. Maybe Dylan will remember. I was doing some presentations, and I called them BIM tips, and they were just quick and dirty sort of facts or ways for people to conceptualize BIM concepts. I decided to post one of them to LinkedIn, and I never had more engagement on a single post. I think to this day, it is the most commented and reshared and disagreed with post I've ever had. I don't know if any of you guys saw it, but it was just all it said was BIM does not equal Revit. That's all it said, and then it had some comments underneath it. I got messages from people all throughout the industry, either singing my praises or telling me that I was out to lunch. So it's clear, we all know that this is always a hot topic, but I do understand for many people, Revit is baby's first BIM. So I get where a lot of people come from. A certain industry will just a certain company will call them the evil empire, has a little bit of a slight monopoly currently, but that as many of us are aware, that's starting to change finally, which is very exciting. I'm going to go to another comment here from another BIM user. We have, in a BIM implemented project, the design phase is change driven. The ease of making changes inspired the name Revit, a contraction of revise instantly. That is a fun tidbit that I did not know. So whoever that is, thank you for sharing. You've made us all a little bit more knowledgeable. Do VDC professional use an agile approach or a traditional approach? Dylan, I don't know. Do you want to take a stab at what you think this question might be getting at?
In my take on this, you have to use an agile approach. You can't take the traditional approach. I find the traditional approach is usually clouded in bureaucracy, whereas looking at an agile approach, it's about getting this information together, making it usable, getting the value out there first. Just because we view it as something that's important doesn't mean that, or not important, doesn't mean that other people can't leverage or benefit from that being available to them. If you take maybe a traditional approach, you're going to find yourself hold up quite a few times because you may not have people who can participate in the ways that you need.
Right.
We just got another question just in on the chat from another LinkedIn user. Does a CAN-BIM certification help in career growth? Panel, what are your thoughts?
I'll jump. I sit on the board of CAN-BIM, so biasly I'll say of course it does, but I'll be honest that when I recruit, I do look. So what CAN-BIM certification gives is just an indication that a process was undertaken, that has peers review your credentials and delineate at what level based on a standard. So it's there, it can be used in that way. Chetna can vouch. You know, when I was at IBI here at Turner Fleischer, you know, you're on my team. You know, we get the certification. The more senior you are, the higher you'll try to achieve that the higher certification. And it's just the level setting. It's a benchmarking, if you will, throughout the industry, and it does help.
Yeah, I would say it's more like it would help with at least the basic screening, because the level you're at, some of the great minds are reading your experience. I've gone through that process. So I know that you have to really sit down and write what you've done. And somebody who's not had the experience and the understanding cannot write very nicely to those questions. They cannot justify those questions. So it does help. Yeah, we encourage all the time that go get the certification done. The level 1 is actually pretty easy to get. So yeah, go get it. And it also actually helps doors to a lot of interaction with CAN BIM building transformations now, to their staff, which helps them. You can actually ask them questions and be connected with a community. That actually opens the door to getting connected to a community.
And just I want to swing this question over maybe to you, Laura. Do you find, and now you work in a much more international team from what I understand, and so maybe not everything is related directly to CAN BIM. Are there certifications that you know of outside of CAN BIM that or organizations to join that someone like this LinkedIn user might turn towards for career growth?
There is one. I don't know it off the top of my head, and I was wondering if you were going to come ask me, because I don't have CAN BIM certification. Definitely part of the community, have them for years, but there are a number of different ones, you know, throughout the globe. It's our Canadian designation, so it's definitely recognized here. Will it help outside? Sure, right? Because you have that BIM certification. Someone's going to recognize what that means, even internationally. So.
I think there are. Building Smart Canada is developing a certification process, because I'm a lot into these certifications. Also, there are ISO certifications out there, which, you know, you get an understanding of ISO system. I think CAN BIM will give you like a very, very basic like step into the door. But if you really, really want to advance, ISO certification and be a Building Smart International or Building Smart Canada has really good certifications to offer too. In fact, even BSI has a BIM training, fundamental training program.
No, I think that's very fair. And one final question to kind of elaborate on that to yourself, Dylan. I just wanted to ask: do you see you've seen many parts of this industry over the years? Do you see a change among especially sub-trades, installers, M&E contractors? Do you see them pursuing things like CAN BIM certifications, CAN BIM partnerships? I know you've been a presenter at CAN BIM events yourself, so I just was curious if you've seen trends over the years.
I wouldn't say it's necessarily a trend. I see a swashbucket of, yes, we're on board, we're embracing it, we want to do this, we recognize the value. And I see some that are still stuck in, we don't know how, we don't have the expertise, we're not sure what to do. And it makes it challenging. It leaves you in a, you know, for somebody in our role, it can leave you in a pretty tough spot, because you have a, you know, a strong desire to want the overall process to succeed. But you know, that they're typically brought into having to outsource or bring in a third party to help them. I think at some point, you know, there's going to be a big enough momentum where it's going to be just a necessity. You can't not do it. The rate of change and the speed and efficiency that you can achieve, it's hard to ignore.
No, I think that's very fair, and it certainly squares with what I've seen as well in my limited time in the industry. Is you know, that at some point it'll probably be a requirement to play the game, but it's very much kind of a mixed playing field at the moment. But I would echo, I think, a lot of the comments of the other panelists. At the very least, being a CanBIM member is there's no real downside to being part of that community. Is it gonna fast track you to the top of every single recruitment list? Not by itself, obviously. Marcella, sorry, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Well, I was going to say that having the CanBIM certification kind of plays into the self-development aspect, and also kind of into what Brent was saying. It demonstrates that you are demonstrating, for lack of a better term, to to people who might be looking at your resume, that you're able to be analyzed by a group of your peers, and they validate that you have a certain level of competency and experience, and we are granting you this this status or this credential that says that you attained or have that level of competency. And the other part of that I was trying to explain at the beginning of my comment was that because our industry is so dynamic, self-learning is an integral part of success in this industry. And I think the CanBIM certification shows that you're the type of person that will pursue that, and opens you up to the opportunities to hear about things, learn about projects that people are on, or other in parts of the industry that people work in, and gets you that exposure through a network.
No, and I think that's very fair, and it also signals to not just to your employer, but also just your peers throughout the industry, that you're trying to work towards a common benchmark of what does it mean for us to call ourselves BIM or VDC professionals or digital project delivery professionals. So thank you so much to all of our panelists for those questions that we went through. What I want to do now is open it up to our audience questions. We have about 20 minutes left in the session, and so we're going to go through any of the questions that we might have missed in the chat. Joe, I don't know if there's if we've got some that we kind of skipped over that maybe we could jump to.
Yeah, if you notice, Brent got replaced by someone not as cool. He had to leave. So yeah, a lot of our questions relate to how do we, for example, let's just go back here. Yeah, like where are sorry, let me go back to the beginning. One problem. Did we cover this one?
Yeah,
Yep.
so we covered part of, actually go back to
I was thinking about that one as well, and I was going to actually address question 3.
Okay.
Would you like me to go ahead and take a stab at it?
Go ahead, Marcellus. Take your best stab
So
at it.
This isn't an answer on behalf of Ellis Don. It's an answer, I think, on behalf of the industry. And the best way that I can answer this is say exactly what you said previously. It's exactly what you're stating in the question, is that you really, really want this, and your passion is to work in BDC, because I think that in and itself, to me, is something that I look for. It's just going to help be self-serving into all other aspects, because so much of this job is learning new things, rethinking the way that we approach project management. And I think just showing that spirit is really, really important. So that's the best way that I can answer that question. Not just for Ellis Don, but for all companies collectively, I believe.
And I would also echo what Marcellus is saying. So for the person that did write this question, do exactly that. Put first and foremost your passion and your interests and your desires of where you want to be working, and lead with that, because the person that has the checklist with "I know all these softwares" is not going to be at the top of the recruitment list. But Laura, I was wondering, could you maybe comment on question 2 of that?
Right. If you have an educational school issued email address, then yes, we can hook you up. No problem. Send me your email address.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
And then, sorry, go ahead, Joe.
Oh no, it's we got a call out on. We're going to try to get Sage some Celebri licenses. Because they've built all kinds of educational information, and I know someone said they wanted their 2 years back from Sage, but that's but that was a great comment. I love it. But of course, they do a great job there on their VDC stuff. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. You know what? I don't know. Most of the software, I mean, one of the first skills that somebody needs to have to be a VDC professional is the hunger to learn something new every 6 months. I mean, I don't know if Heath is still like listening into this, but he said that, if you want to rock at this job, you have to have every 6 months, you have to learn something new. And you cannot spend a hell lot of time on it. So you don't even need a 1-year license. Most software, even Celebri, would give a month or 15 days free license, a trial license. Yeah. I think just installing, getting onto it, watching some free resources available online, just to get the look and feel of it, going on the first date with that software would help you understand what kind of job you're getting into. I've also seen, and I mean, this session is about VDC and how to pivot into it. I've seen some people who are in this job who do this, but then they do not want to stay in because it becomes too repetitive for them at some point, right? So because they don't want to learn something new, or maybe that's not their beef, right? So I would say, before we put, before we say like software A, B, C, I mean, the first skill set you need to have is that you need to have that hunger to explore treats your software like, you're in a candy store, that you want to try every candy and see which one goes well with your palate.
I was gonna say, Chetna, I did that as a child, and I got in trouble for tasting all the candy in the candy shop. I realized I was going about it slightly wrong, but I know exactly what you're talking about. So another question in the chat about how you learn on your own time. Are there free or paid courses available? I mean, we've talked about this a little bit, but for you guys, what would be your recommendation as the best places to look for learning resources for BIM and VDC?
I did a bunch of mine on Globally training, but my initial response to that is you need to pick something that best suits your learning style.
Okay.
Yeah, I watched a webinar almost every day for lunch for years. Yeah. It's painful. You got to put in the time for sure.
Yeah.
You're going to find both free and paid. The free courses will get you only so far, for sure. So you can cough up a little bit of dough.
Okay. I think, there are a lot of free and paid courses. We start with free because free will give you a sense of what you're getting into, right? And then commit your time and money to the paid ones. I have signed up for a C# course. It's been 1.5 years. I've paid money for it. I've attended 4 lectures because I don't have time, and those lectures are still there. I don't know when am I going to finish that course. But what I'm saying is that start with free. See that if you can really devote time, and if you can devote time, go ahead and do the paid courses. We at BIMwise do all these courses all the time. You can look at our website and just send us an email. We have the courses all the time coming up.
This was another one from Deval. how does someone go from modeling for BIM and VDC to something more in line with planning, workflow, and automation? Does anyone of our panelists have, what's your take? How would you transition if you were in that role to a planning, workflow, and more automation responsibilities? What's your thoughts?
For me, when I went from modeling from architecture into the GC side, I had to ask everybody who already had that experience. I didn't know what went into, planning and how they schedule things and how they kept track of it. I asked a lot of questions from the people who did that. When I learned about, everybody's got their own workflows, into the automation side of things. Again, I'm still asking a lot of questions where everybody has their passion, right? So you have that background where you might have the BIM VDC, but somebody else has got a passion and they've maybe gotten into drones and robots. You talk to them, you start up a partnership, you hook up, and you can do those things together. And that's a great way to learn, to be honest.
And we're just going to go to kind of a similar question as what we saw before. And Laura, just maybe if you want to elaborate a bit more, because this was your transition, I believe. What would you say to this user? Basically, elaborating on what you just said.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a long slog, but just like everybody here is saying, if you have the passion to learn, you can do it. Be humble, ask questions for sure. When I went to the VDC side, again, that coordination, I came from the architecture side. And I thought I knew everything. The coordination I did on that side meant nothing to the guys that were building it on site. And so I was taught what was of value to them. What I coordinated on one side didn't necessarily work for the people making and installing. Software skills are fine, totally learnable. The harder lessons for me to learn was part of the humbling. We're willing to ask questions. Nobody in this industry knows everything, and if they tell you they do, they're lying. For sure. Like, everybody's got their skill sets, and we've all learned different ways and different lessons. And ask anybody who's taken any one of these pivoting paths will tell you, they'll answer your questions, because we all did things a harder way. We don't want that for everybody. Yeah.
Well, and it'll make all of our jobs much harder if there's only one way to do that pivot.
And boring.
And boring, and terribly boring. Just one more question I want to get to before we sign off here. This is from Ben Frick. What books or other resources would you recommend to assist with this pivot? Chetna, I don't know. Do you have Chetna's top reading picks posted somewhere? Or I would recommend to Ben start following BIMWise and the BIM Student. That's Chetna's podcast. That's my recommendation. But Chetna, you let me know if your own podcast is at the top of your list.
Oh yeah, definitely. I've learned a lot of things I listen to a ton of podcasts, and not just the BIM podcast, like technology podcast, lifestyle. Like the only reason I'm a podcaster is because I've listened to a lot of podcasts. So yes, there are a lot of online free resources. CanBIM webinars are really good. They do all these talks that are really, really good. Joe has now started all those online sessions. Yesterday's session was so good. I've watched it like 3 times now. But also there is this book called BIM Manager's Handbook. I've not read like the cover to cover, but there are some reproduced parts of it that some of my employees have brought because they were they were recommended in school, and I found that it was really good. You can go check that out. I'm actually ordering that book from Amazon this weekend to see actually what that book is. There's a if somebody needs to know, I have a list of books that you can go and, just email me, or just send me an email and I'll send you the list. I don't have right on the top of my back, but yeah, go listen to my podcast. It helps me.
Yeah, no, also what we'll do is following this session. So Salma had a question. Can we have any access to your reaches or more information? I don't know specifically what researcher information she was looking for. After this session, I will post a bunch of links, both to Fusion Tech's website, to BIMWise, to George Brown College, to a bunch of resources that are represented by the individuals here on this call. Also, I just want to comment that during the discussion, I didn't get a chance to announce that Brent and Dylan had to jump off. They had other sessions and other engagements they had to jump onto, so we didn't get to wish them farewell. But Salma, there's plenty of information we're going to share. Another thing I'm going to share, and maybe Marcellus can comment on this a little bit, but we'll also share some links to some great surveys that are have been done and are being done by CanBIM. They have a number of think tanks that have looked into a lot of different things, also for recruiters, with information on, survey information on statistics for salary, compensation, experience, who are being hired where, sort of thing. That's information that's available through a think tank that Marcellus is part of. Marcellus, I don't know, do you have anything to add just related to the CanBIM studies that are coming out?
Yeah, the most recently one that we've done is the salary survey through CanBIM, now known as Building Transformations. So I can share a link to that one, and we have a dashboard that's Power BI enabled that is put onto our CanBIM website so that results can be filtered to whatever sort of preferences that you want to see. But I can definitely get a link for you to share.
Awesome. And then so Salma, I don't know if you're still watching, but we'll definitely try to share as many of these resources as possible. I'll probably compile a list to put out after this session, and hopefully organizations like BIMWise and Fusion Tech can share that list when I get it all compiled. There is another question that an individual messaged me that we didn't get to today. We've got just a few more minutes left in our session, but between Marcellus, Chetna, and Laura, do you find that some of the biggest struggles for individuals that want to go into BIM and VDC, that want to take a path through their employer? This question was specifically about, this individual wants to get the training, wants to move in that direction, but that their own employer either doesn't have the resources or doesn't have enough knowledge about the BIM and the VDC industry to really be able to, number one, maybe offer resources for training, or number two, help them find a transition into any of these paths that we talked about tonight. What would your guys' advice for such an individual be?
It's not something that I've done, but what I think that's a really outside of the box sort of approach and could benefit the company for other people, or just the company as a whole, is maybe find a BIM consultant that's willing to sit down with your company or yourself and provide some suggestions, and then approach your manager and say, hey, I've reached out to this person for these reasons. Would you be interested in the three of us sitting down and having a conversation?
Absolutely. I would say we have helped a couple of small and medium-sized, not a couple, more than a couple companies to transition, who are still in the process. They've not done everything perfectly and as per our suggestions, but they are way ahead of where they were 2 years ago. So yes, but also to this individual, I would say that it's your career, it's your passion, right? And if you won't invest into yourself, nobody else would. So if you think you want to pivot into BIM, invest time and possibly some money into your own career. As a new immigrant, I came to Canada in 2012, 4 months pregnant, and I have done at least 10 courses even before and during I was employed by one of the best companies in Canada. Invest time and invest money in yourself. It does give a lot of return on long term. I just said that, you know, when I was a BIM professional, I was a BIM coordinator with Brent in IBI, and I still took the project management course. So you have to invest in yourself. There's no way getting out of it.
Yeah, I agree. I have nothing more to add that they've said at all.
No, that's fantastic. We have one more question. I don't know if we're really gonna get to it, but there was a LinkedIn user asking Dylan, who's had to jump out of the session, about how VDC can help a trade contractor. If that user is still listening, I would recommend, reaching out to any of the panelists on this list through LinkedIn, and reaching out to Dylan yourself, because that's a very loaded question, one that I don't think we'll have time to answer within these next 4 minutes. So I want to thank everyone for joining us for this session. I know it's quite a bit of time to join for the full 2 hours, but man, there was so much great content and insight that we got to cover today. Before we go, I just want to ask if any of our panelists have parting words for those people looking for those paths, those inroads. What if you could leave them with nothing else? What would you leave them with it as your final piece of advice?
Okay,
Go for it. I would say just go for it. Keep learning. Like it doesn't matter what it is. You'll advance your career. The more that you learn about it, the more that you learn about the industry, regardless of whether or not it's BIM or VDC. Ask lots of questions. Like learn about, what the architect does if you're on the GC side. Learn about what the trades do. We're all building these buildings and roads and infrastructures together. So that was always my passion about the whole point of BIM, was that it makes it digitally togetherness. So little lot right there.
Yeah, I would say, like, just to build up on what Laura said, try to learn, but also make technology your best friend. If you cannot make technology your best friend, there are other great careers that you can look at.
And Marcellus, do you have some parting words for those individuals looking for that transition?
Yeah, basically, I think is the biggest thing is be very, very willing to self-educate. Kind of like Chetna said, you always have to be willing to learn something new. Join networking groups, things like that. It's showing that passion, that drive to learn more, because this is such a dynamic part of our industry, and technologies are changing fast, which in turn changes the opportunities and the workflows that we have that we integrate into our standard project management workflows, or some of the things that we're capable of tracking, knowing, and decisions that we make. So I think the root of it all is just be very, very open to always changing how you view things and learning new tools, and being okay with saying, no, that's not important to me, but I spent the time learning it, but I think I can do without that.
Your attention.
Thank you so much, Marcellus. And once again, just as we're signing off here, huge thanks to Joe Magus and the team at Fusion Tech. Like we really do love the work that you guys are doing, and we love the content you're putting out there, Joe. It's been really engaging for all of us who are part of these industries. And just thank you so much, Joe, for hosting this session today. We can't wait to do it again.
You did it. Thank you, Tom, and you did a great job. And congratulations to all your amazing panel. It was great to hear the discussion, and many people will benefit from it.
All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us. A couple of people did ask, and Joe can correct me if I'm wrong, but there will be a recording of this session available. So that should be available for everyone who needs it.
Well, it's available on LinkedIn right afterward on my profile. But if someone wants an actual copy or something, we could probably arrange that too. But yeah, right on my profile, it'll be available.
Alrighty.
Or at the event page, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, on the event page.
As soon as this is finished, it's available. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, and thanks to all of our wonderful panelists for sharing their thoughts and insights. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your week.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.